Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Last Mag Podcast. I'm your host, Primal, and in today's episode, we're going to be breaking down Major 3, the Pro Am Classic. So, guys, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and let's crack on into things. So, the CDL did not have a bracket on their website for me to go through and do my predictions, so I screenshotted what the bracket's going to look like. So here we go, guys. And I'm also using my stylus to write scores in and all. So let's break down the groups. So Group A, we've got Optic versus Omit and G2 versus Surge, with Omit being the challengers team. And honestly, I don't see. Well, when we get to certain things, I'll talk about them. Um, like for predictions and stuff. So for Group B, we have Toronto versus the Huntsmen, which is the Optic Challengers team. And finally, Carolina versus Heretics in Group B. As I was saying, and Carolina versus Heretics in Group B. So let's move to Group C, and I'm going to call this. And when I go through each group, I'm just going to give my thoughts on how I feel it's going to play out in overall confidence. So, Group C, we've got the LA Thieves versus P7 Notorious or Project 7 Notorious, and Jailmates versus Breach. Now, that group I'll talk more on in detail in a second. And finally, for Group D, we have FaZe Vegas versus Rock Esports and Riyadh Falcons versus Cloud9. So, let's move on over to Group A. And what color do I want to just consistently stay with for score-wise? You know what? No. I think a nice. Yeah, I think dark red will be fine. So Optic versus Omit. This is Omit EU versus Optic. Optic's undefeated. Omit, they've just been slept on in my personal opinion. But when it comes between Optic and Omit, I am going to say Optic takes Omit down pretty comfortably, 3-1, sending Omit down to elimination. Now let's talk about G2 versus Surge. So I feel like this stinks of Game 5. And I am going to put more faith in G2 just because they've had better land placement. So moving on over. We will. So I'll fill in the groups in a second. So Surge and Omit. And Optic versus G2. Alright, so I am going to go and okay, I'll start off with elimination and we'll work our way forwards. So Surge versus Omit. I feel like Surge will be able to get this done. I'll say 3-1 in favor of Surge. Omit's knocked out. And now Optic versus G2. I feel like this might be a potential grueler. But if Optic plays the cards right, which I feel they will, it'll go 3-1 Optic, and they'll send G2 down to losers. And they will have to battle up against Surge. And I do apologize about my E, guys. Alright, so... Oh no, wrong color I need. There we go. So G2 versus Surge, I feel more, as I say, G2's just had better placements. I feel like G2's going to move on into groups, out of groups. I'll say 3-1, especially after getting their pants blown off by Optic. So Optic will be your number 1 seed, and G2 will be your number 2 seed. All right, so over to Group B we go. We've got Toronto Koi versus the Huntsmen, which is Optic's Challengers team. After being P7 notorious to get to Grand Finals to qualify for the Pro-Am Classic, honestly, Huntsmen, job well done, but Drawn Koi, I just feel like this is a really bad breakup for them, so I am going to go with Toronto Koi. 3. This could go game 5, but I'm going to say Toronto pulls out some dens on Huntsman and say Toronto gets it done in 4. Now, moving on, Carolina versus Heretics. Sorry, Carolina, you guys just haven't looked too good recently. I'm going to go Heretics 3-1. Yes, Heretics haven't looked too hot recently too, but I just have more faith in Heretics just based on LAN performances from Major 1 and how they've played recently outside of their stinkers, outside of FaZe. But it's just Heretics could be map testing, but I just got more faith. Alright, so let's see here. Huntsman versus Ravens. Then Koi versus you know what? I'll use different color. Alright, so moving down to losers, just like how I've done it before. Huntsman versus Ravens. I feel like Huntsmen are better off than Ravens. I'm going to say 3-1 to the Huntsmen. Huntsmen move on. And then Heretics versus Koi. Heretics have beaten the pants off of Koi at, I think it was Major 1 it was. So I'm going to go Heretics 3-1. this could also be Koi 3-1, depending on how comfortable Koi is with the map pool, depending on what it is. So Koi will fall down to losers. Koi. Then Huntsman. Alright, so down to wire, nitty gritty. I'm going to say Koi steal the show. I want to call game 5, but I feel like Koi might, like I said, just steal it away. But this could be, you know what? I'm going to call game 5. First game 5 of Group B. And Koi get it done over Heretics. So, not Heretics, over Huntsman. Sorry. So, moving in. So, Heretics. Koi. There we go. And guys, I will erase the board when I get to certain. Once we're out of group stage, I'll make sure I have the pairings lined up exactly how they should be and go from there. So let's move down to Group C. And this is where things get strange and interesting at the same time because I see this as the Wall of Death. Well, the Group of Death, I should say. Because Thieves, they struggled last weekend. And Jumpmates have been in a serious slump. So, Thieves versus Notorious. Now, Beans on Notorious has threatened to put in Hills Cliffside for Hardpoint, which is a map GA'd by the pros. If somehow Cliffside gets in, there's going to be some serious talks of what the heck is going on. Like, none of the pros are going to be happy. You're going to literally have people shouting at each other on stage, I feel like. So, Thieves versus Notorious. I'm going to go Thieves. I'll say 3-1 to Thieves. But if somehow P7 gets in certain. If P7 gets in certain map, like Cliffside, it could go game 5. Maybe. Depending on which hard point it is. Like, if it's 1, I'm not too concerned. But if it's 4, we're going the distance. But we just gotta wait and see for tomorrow. Now, Jailmates versus Breach. This one is interesting. I feel like Jailmates still have some form to them. I'll say 3-1 over Breach. And sending P7 and Breach down to the losers bracket. Alright, okay, so what color do I want to do for P7? I'll give them the gold color. So P7 versus Breach. That feels like a Breach color. Alright, and then I need an. Oh. Alright, so Gentle Mates versus I'll put these in the same color as G2. So thieves. Alright, so let's move. Okay, so let's move on down. Done. Alright, so Breach versus P7. I feel like P7 might be the better team. I'll say 3-2 P7 gets it done over Breach. And put P7 there. Now, Thieves versus Gentlemen, I just feel like Thieves, they're probably the better team here. I'm going to say 3-1 over Gentlemen. Maybe Gentlemen take the overload against Thieves. And here's where things get interesting, chat. So, pick up Thieves again. Not Thieves, Gentlemen. I am going to call for a decisive. No, hang on a sec. I'm going to call for a decisive map for Masterclass from Envoy and Neptune. And Jailmates and Thieves will move on. And M8. Now, there is a world where Jailmates don't make it out of bracket, or not bracket, out of group play, but if that were to happen, the team needs to seriously blow it up. Now, moving on over to the final group. There we go. FaZe versus Rocky Sports. I feel like FaZe, clear winner. I'm going to call them 3-1. Maybe FaZe potentially map pulls potentially, but this could also be a 3-0. So, FaZe. I'll make FaZe dark purpley pink. Now, moving on over to Riyadh versus Cloud9. I feel like Riyadh. It's like Cloud9's its challengers team. I'm sorry, but there's no way Cloud9 makes it. I'll say 3-1 Cloud9. If Cloud9 doesn't take a map, called it. But that is who I've got. Now moving on over. So Falcons versus FaZe for number 1 seed. And Cloud9. Alright, so C9 and what color do I want to do for rock? I'll do dark orange. Okay, so let's bounce back on over. C9 versus Rock. Sorry, C9, you're not making it out. I'll give you 1. Rock, I'll give you 3. Rock takes it pretty convincing fashion. Now, FaZe versus Falcons. Now, these guys, I forget what their record is against each other, but I believe FaZe has the edge right now. So I'm going to say FaZe 3. Oh, no. Whew. I'll say 3-1 over Falcons. And FaZe takes the number 1 seed for Group D. Playing Falcons into losers. So so before Major 3 started, there was rumors of Falcons making a roster change. They didn't make a change, so I feel like that might chalk the chemistry for them potentially. Like, it's definitely shook them hard a bit. So Falcons versus Rock Esports. I am going to go Game 5. I'll say Falcons take it over. Let me redo that. Falcons take over Rock, and then FaZe will be your number 1, and Falcons will be your number 2 seed. Now, let me see how the bracket's going to play from here. So, all right, I'll be right back, guys. Hang on a second. All right, so here's what group stage is going to look like for me. Now, I'll get into the bracket in a second. All right, I figured out how this is going to work. So, Group A seed versus Group B seed for the number 1 spot face each other. So it's Heretic versus Optic. So I was trying to continue drawing, but it wanted screenshot for some reason. Hang on a second. So I'm going to say Optic beats Heretics in 4. So Optic will go on to advance. Heretics will fall down. Now, Thieves versus FaZe, El Clasico. It's like we've got classic matches: Optic versus Heretics, Thieves versus FaZe. So I am going to go with FaZe, and this potentially could go Game 5. So I'm going to go with FaZe on this one. I know people are probably going to say Promo. Thieves have literally looked better, but I will argue with you guys. The last week of qualifiers, not Optic, Thieves have looked very shaky. It's like maybe they map pull test, maybe they had a good weekend, but still, it doesn't tell me how they're going to play on land, especially with the new meta. So, FaZe moves on, Optic moves on, Thieves and Heretics drop down. Now, let's talk about Group B, or the number 2 seed. So, G2 versus Koi, this is where things get ugly. I'm calling Game 5, and I'm going Koi. And then Mates versus Falcons, I'm going to go Mates over Falcons. I'll say Game 4. So, winner side going into, well, we're still on Saturday, sorry. So, then we would have Optic versus Koi. and Mates versus FaZe. So we'll get to that in a second. Hang on a second. Alright, so then it'll become Heretics versus Thieves in Losers Final. And then G2 versus Falcons. Now, I'm going to say Thieves beat the pants off of Heretics. I'll call a 3-1. Thieves move on. And they will face either Texas or FaZe. Well, Optic versus or FaZe. Now, G2 versus Falcons. Sorry, Falcons, you guys are done. I'm going to go G2, I'll say 3. Do I want to call? No. Falcons have had G2's number. But it's a LAN, baby. I'm going to go with G2. Okay, I'm sticking with my original pick. I'll say G2 3-2. It's going to be around 11. And now let's move on up to winners finals. Well, hold on a sec. No, sorry. Semifinals. So Texas versus FaZe. I've got Optic taking it in 3-2, breaking FaZe's hearts of getting to winners finals. And then Mates versus Koi. I just feel like Mates might be clucking at that point, but so might Koi. Who do I've got more faith in? I'm going to go with Koi. I'm going to take him over the Gelmates. 3-2. So that'll make a that'll make a Thieves versus FaZe and a G2 versus Mates. Losers. With Texas and, well, with Optic versus Koi in winners finals. I am going to go with Texas in winners finals. I'll say Optic gets it done in 4. It could be a 3-0. Koi will fall down to face whoever wins. Well, to face in losers finals. Now, Thieves versus FaZe, I feel like this will be the end of the road for Thieves because FaZe are going to come out and get the job done in a map 4. Then we'll have G2 versus Mates, and I am going to say Mates are pissed, and they are going to go 3-1 over G2, making a FaZe versus Mates losers round 4. And I'm going to call game 5. FaZe 3, Gelmates 2, and that'll be a respective finish for Gelmates after the performances they've been having. Then it'll be FaZe versus Koi. I'm calling game 5 because last time these guys played on LAN, this definitely should have gone to game 5. And I'm just going to say FaZe gets it done, and we have another rematch of Major 2. But instead of FaZe slamming Optic like they did in Major 2, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say this goes Game 7, round 11. Nitty gritty, 1v1, Shotzi versus Simp. I'm going to say FaZe goes back to back. It's like, yes, Texas has optics been looking different, but I just have to go with my boys in this one. I'm sorry, guys, but I've got to go with FaZe for Major 3 champs. Alright, let me know what your guys' thoughts are in the comment section below. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys later. Cannot wait for matches start tomorrow. Peace out.